Hi, how are you? Rhetorical, I guess. But it's a question I don't know that we always ask ourselves. It varies, right? Fluctuates. I know sometimes when I ask myself, how am I feel really good. Other times, not so much. It's normal, right? Sometimes it's a normal reaction to, I heard someone wise say that one time, and I don't remember if it was in school or what, but it's a normal reaction to an abnormal situation. Well, I think we can all say that about life in general, especially after the last few years. I don't know. I feel like I've lost time, quite truthfully. I don't know, has it been 2 years, 2.5 years, 3 years? Who knows at this point? Um, I don't know. I came out here to sit on the porch again and listen to nature. It's when I'm always at my most peaceful. And then I found myself disappointed. Disappointment's a word, isn't it? And what was I disappointed in? Oh, I don't have a lot of neighbors. I live on a fairly quiet road, but it seems like everybody mows their lawn on a different day, which is normal, right? I'm sure, people don't just get up and like, let's look at your calendar. When do you want to mow your lawn? I mean, plus, different lawns, depending on soil and nutrients and everything else, are going to grow faster, and everyone has different expectations on what a mowed lawn should look like, right? Or how they want to care for their yard. And it dawned on me, not for the first time, but since I'm sitting here being all introspective and everything, that typically disappointment revolves around expectations, right? If I expect to come out here and have it a certain temperature, a certain breeze, certain noise limit, I might be disappointed if those expectations aren't fulfilled. Well, you can apply that to something as simple as just wanting some peace and quiet away from a busy household, or the world as a whole. When we have our expectations on how we think things should be, right? It's a judgment word, usually a shaming word. And if those expectations aren't fulfilled, which rarely they are 100%, especially when you factor in people and free will and all, right? The world's full of people who have opinions, who have expectations, and sometimes not even realized expectations. Sometimes it's the expectation that this person's going to treat me a certain way. And then when they don't, we experience disappointment. And sometimes that disappointment, well, like any emotion, emotions are experienced on a spectrum, right? If you think about anger, on the smaller side, you can look at anger as irritation or frustration or annoyance. And that can escalate to rage. Most annoyances don't escalate to rage, but I'm just trying to highlight the spectrum of anger. And if someone says, I'm angry, and someone else says, well, I'm enraged, that can also mean something different to both people. Just going to use a personal example, but I'll try and take the players out so I don't embarrass anyone. But I remember a story of a couple when they were early in their inception, if you will. And they were still getting to know each other's communication styles. And one grew up in a louder household, we'll categorize it like that, and the other one in a more quiet, less expressive household. And one time this couple had a disagreement and voices weren't raised, but tones were used, right? Words were used, words are powerful. And they eventually came to a conclusion and a compromise, and everything was fine. But when this story was being relayed on one participant's side, it was expressed that the other person screamed at them. So then there had to be a discussion around, what does scream mean to you? Because I know households where screaming was so loud that you could lose your voice. Ultimately, the person came to the conclusion that, okay, I misused the word scream. Voices weren't raised, but you were clearly disappointed or upset. Well, fair. We don't have to raise our voice to express our disappointment or to express when we're upset, do we? That's the power of words. That's the power of tone. That's why a lot of times things can be misconstrued when it's written word. Did you ever get that one person who doesn't know email etiquette and everything is all caps all the time? And then as you get to know the person, you're not offended anymore when you're getting yelled at, because you know you're not getting yelled at. It's just they keep it on all caps. Maybe because for them, all caps isn't yelling. It doesn't mean I'm angry. It means I'm just really impassioned about what I'm trying to communicate. Everybody's different. But this is, again, what I try to highlight, the power of observation, mindfulness. It's very, people aren't, well, let's put it this way, people are not cookie cutter, right? Usually we vibe with our tribe, right? We tend to be around people that are similar to us because that's what we're drawn to, or people that we can learn from, because we are typically are also drawn to that, depending on what it is, if it's not as a triggering of a subject matter. We oftentimes as people don't want to be around people that are going to trigger us. And certain topics, although they may challenge us, and oftentimes for the better, or the betterment of our growth, we avoid. Well, there's the birds. Love the birds. Hi. A lot of blue jays. Unbelievable. Although they say that's good fortune. Something about loyalty. Anyway, I digress. Where was I? Words. The power of words and how they're used and being mindful. Because there's so much that goes behind it, right? There's emotion. And sometimes people will tell us that it's our fault that they feel a certain way. Maybe we triggered them, but that doesn't mean it's our fault. It doesn't have to be about fault. Everybody's kind of walking their own path and trying to figure out what's best for them, because maybe they just haven't learned a lesson yet. I don't know. I was just having this conversation with my cousin the other day. And I am going to apologize now because I did get off track with the bird. He was fairly obnoxious, but we'll take it. But we were talking about approval of other people's behaviors, or even of our own. Because sometimes we're disappointed in ourselves, right? We have expectations of goals that we want to achieve, or things that we think we should do or be, and maybe we're not living up to our expectations, right? And then we sit with disappointment, which can quickly spiral or go down the rabbit hole of shame and self-judgment. As you'll notice when I have these little discussions, everything's connected, right? Whether I'm talking about balance or I'm talking about, I don't even know some of the things I've talked about because I talk so much. God save the queen. Not literally, but whatever. God save us all, I don't know. But my point is that it's all connected. All of these things tie into each other. And I guess that is, in the bigger picture, the balance, right? As we learn how these things are connected and we learn to navigate them, and they pop up for us because we're being mindful and we're observing, then we learn how to tweak it, if you will. We learn when to push back and say, no, maybe I set myself an unrealistic expectation. Or maybe I put an unrealistic expectation on someone else based on an assumption or a belief system. I spent most of my life being disappointed in my mother, for instance. I didn't understand her struggles because they weren't mine to understand. It wasn't until many years later when I learned a lot about mental illness and things like that I could finally appreciate the struggles that she had to live with. That doesn't mean approval of behaviors, but I probably would have been far less judgmental or far less angry or disappointed had I had a better understanding earlier. But again, we can say that about anything. When we learn a new skill and then we sit and we look back and we say, God, if I knew that then, what other choices would I have made? Or how could I have avoided this predicament, or whatever the case may be? And in those moments when we see or feel that, we need to remind ourselves that you can, much like I've said before, you can only work with what you got. As we learn things, as we gain new skills and we put them in our toolbox, as we gain wisdom or experience or insight, we can't apply them to the past in the sense where we're going to judge our actions of the past on others or ourselves. What we can do is see it for what it is and learn from it. Maybe reframe our belief system around what happened. For many years, I thought my mother didn't love me. I know it's really personal, but I'm just using it as an example because I know I'm not in that boat alone. Whether it's your mother or another person or whoever. And I realize now that that's not true. It's not true. I thought and told myself I didn't love her. Or other people even. But that's not true either. Love doesn't come with conditions. Not real love. And conditions are expectations, right? If you treat me like this, I'm not going to love you. Well, then that's not love. That's what boundaries are for. If someone treats you in a particular way that's hurtful or disrespectful, well, then you set a boundary. And they're either going to be willing, based on their own motivations, beliefs, and everything else, to work within the parameters of those boundaries, or they're not. But at no point is their choices or behaviors a reflection on you. Unless, of course, you're the one who said or did something that pushed someone away. But I hear all the time, if something's meant for you, it will always come back to you. Whether that's a person, a situation. Yeah, we have free choice. We make choices along the way that may postpone things or that may derail things at different points in our life. But ultimately, if something's meant for you, you will attain it. It becomes really difficult when you're dealing with people because, again, you have free choice. And that's why most of our disappointments tend to be around people. whether ourselves or others in our lives. It's normal. Some situations may be perceived as abnormal, especially when you talk about abuse or things like that. And I would never condone that. There's no excuse in the world that condones harming someone against their will, especially. However, much like the conversation I was starting to talk about that I had with my cousin, is that everyone is on their own soul's path. We're all at different levels of learning, understanding, experience. Our experiential knowledge varies depending on age or situations, or even the people in our lives. Not everyone deals with abuse. I think we all do on some level, whether it's the rude customer service person. That's certainly not in the same category as someone who is living with domestic violence or something like that. However, much like emotions, things are experienced on a spectrum, right? Our boundaries may vary depending on the person, the players, if you will, or the situation. You know, you think of infidelity, right? Some people will say, if someone cheated on me, I would never, ever be with them again. And other people I've seen who are able to forgive. Neither situation is right or wrong. It's what's right or wrong for you, depending on where you're at in your life. And it's nobody's job to judge that. I've gotten to a place in my life where I try not to judge anyone. It's harder with myself. I tend to hold myself to different standards. I always have. But I'm trying to balance that out. Because if it's a standard that I can excuse for someone else, why can't I do that for myself, right? Just thinking out loud, right? In any case, expectations usually come from our belief systems on how we think something should be, based on how we perceive it. It's kind of like, I was talking a little bit last time on the power of words, right? I remember hearing a story years ago of this couple that were very happily together for like 20 years or something like that. Ideal couple, right? And then they get married and a year later they're divorced. And we hear stories like that. It's not just around couples or whatever, but we hear stories like that. And it's like, what happened? Well, if we had to do a deep dive on it, in a nutshell, I'd say that their belief system around what a husband or a wife should be was very different than what they viewed a partner as. Boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever you want to categorize it as. And those expectations started taking over. Well, I was raised that, your job is this, or this is what you should do. Should. Always hear the words. etc., so on and so forth. And then we sit with the festering of that in our heads. And then what we tend to do when we feel or believe something so strongly is we project that onto the other person. Sometimes we have full conversations that we emotionally react to that never even took place. Right? We rationalize it out in our own mind. And it's we can sit there and say, no, I never actually had that conversation, but the emotions are the same when it's all said and done. We come to the conclusion that, well, I feel this, and I feel that I'm right in this after I think through this, and therefore I expect them to behave like this, and if they don't, well, then that's my sign, right? That's my sign that they don't care or that they don't respect me, without possibly ever having uttered a word, without ever having had communication that said, these are my boundaries. Or, sometimes people think, oh, I haven't heard from this person in a long time. They must not care about me, or they don't want to hear from me, or whatever. We hear that all the time, at least I do. And oftentimes when you reconnect, you find out, well, no, they were trying to respect your boundaries because maybe they perceived a situation differently. Maybe they thought when you didn't get back to them that you were in a situation where you couldn't, and figured, well, you'll reach out when you can. Whatever. Or maybe they had a belief system around a particular word or something. Or, oh, you sent me a text in all caps. You must have been angry at me, so I don't know. I had a similar situation happen to me years ago. I had a friend, it was when email was still brand new. So I was still navigating email. I wasn't, I was a novice at best. And I used it a little bit to connect with a friend of mine who was using someone else's email because they didn't have their own email. And they apparently were kidding with me, but because I thought that there was the potential that they were this other person, I was like, oh no, I hope I didn't get them in trouble. So I didn't email again for a really long time. And then eventually I bumped into them in person and they were like, oh, what, you just drop off my planet? And I was like, well, the other person who owned the email emailed me this. And I was like, I hope I didn't get you in trouble. So I figured I would just, meet up with you and at some point and tell you about it. It turns out it was actually them kidding around. And then they thought that I was mad at them or that I was avoiding them or whatever. It's like these things happen, right? And I was like, oh my God, no, that's not what happened. I would never avoid you. And the whole time we weren't talking, I was missing them. It was so funny. I was like, well, it wasn't funny to experience it, but it was like, oh my God. But again, expectations, right? Belief systems without the actual facts or proof. Expectations get us into a lot of trouble when it comes to people because we expect, maybe because they're in a particular role, that we have belief systems around that role, and therefore there should be a particular type of behavior. And when we don't see that, we make assumptions. We fill in the blanks. That's what our brain does. Our brain fills in the blanks, and depending on your insecurities, depending on the challenges in your life, or the situations that have been unresolved, or the struggles that you may have, depending on whether you have positive belief systems about yourself, negative belief systems, whatever the case may be, they all impact how we integrate our experiences, how we perceive other people's behaviors. I don't know, it's just food for thought. I felt like talking about that because dude's still mowing his lawn. I suppose I should be thankful because at least it'll look nice. I should, right? I should be out there. I'm sitting here putting myself down because I'm not out there weeding and doing gardening, which I typically love to do, but my leg's been bothering me, and I'm like, the idea or thought of kneeling in the dirt right now is not a positive one. So then I can catch myself saying, oh, dang, you're not doing it, you're lazy, or you're this or that. It's like, stop it, right? I'm using myself as an example because I never talk about things that I probably haven't experienced myself on some level, to a degree. And quite truthfully, I try to be real in life. I try to be transparent. I think the world could benefit from more people like that, but not that people should be like me. That's not what I mean. I'm just saying it's hard enough when there isn't communication or there's difficulties understanding our belief systems around communication, around words, around language. and dealing with other people. It's hard enough when we do it with ourselves. So if you're having struggles with people or the world in general, because there's all kinds of expectations right now in the world, and then all kinds of emotions around trying to reconcile those expectations with reality, right? Just be mindful of that. Recognize, what are the expectations I'm putting on this situation? Are they realistic? Are they setting myself up for disappointment, or am I setting myself up for success? And be realistic, right? I'm a realist with a dash of optimism. So most will see me as an optimist, especially if they're a pessimist, because I always try to look at the bright side. I always try to have a positive, abundant mindset. However, my point in this is that even I deal with disappointment on multiple levels at different extremes. And that's normal. Life as it's in general can be perceived as abnormal. If you think of some of the situations we've all had to overcome in life, it's kind of like, how is this normal? Right? That's okay. It is what it is. It's there to teach us, to help us grow, whether that's within ourselves, but it's also within the dynamics of the relationships in our lives. How do we help other people grow without pushing, without putting expectations on them, without telling them how they should be, right? But accepting them for who they are and for where they're at, because that's love. That doesn't mean we don't have to navigate disappointment within that dynamic. Of course we do. People have free will, and people are on different levels of their experience. But that doesn't mean we have to withhold love. It's finding that balance within ourselves, because obviously we have to make sure that we're cared for, that our boundaries are being respected. And sometimes that means we sometimes are out of communication or out of people's lives who we would rather be in. But again, if something's meant for you, you'll eventually come back around, right? Or not. And then you realize that maybe there are better and other things on the horizon. Maybe someone just isn't good for you in the moment. Or maybe they are, and someone's making choices that aren't good for them. I don't know. We're all different. We're all different. Some people learn their lessons, other people don't. I guess that's the whole idea of reincarnation, right? We just keep coming around the globe, spinning around. You don't get it right in one life, you get another one to figure it out, right? I don't know. I'm not saying that that's what happens, but I don't know. Everyone believes different things. I'm not judging one way or the other. It's figuring it out for yourself and being mindful of your own expectations and how you apply those to yourself as well as to other people, and how that makes you feel, and let that indicate, would I be better off and would I feel better if I adjusted those expectations? If I saw things maybe from a different perspective, because perception is everything. All right. Well, he's not going to stop mowing his lawn anytime soon. But I can still listen to nature, and there is a nice breeze, so I'm going to enjoy some music while I sit out here too. Maybe some white noise. Have a good day, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.